Today, I'm showing you the making of some hard and dark techno adjacent stuff on my dual Novation Circuit setup, mostly the circuit rhythm. This is part of an ongoing series where I create and show the progress of a live set on the Novation Circuits. I've played this whole thing in front of an audience, and this section does go incredibly hard live. So let's get into it. All right, so here's where we are in the set at this point. This is where we last left off. That builds. That builds a bit more. And eventually, that builds to... So let's start with this full track. There's quite a bit going on here, and it is truly all circuit rhythm and being hard carried by the circuit rhythm's distortion. That's what that sounds like originally, if you can even believe it. This distortion goes hard. I've been gassing it up quite a bit over time, and it has really come in clutch for stuff like this. So as you probably noticed, this features two separate samples that I'm switching between, a kick and a bass one shot. So then we build. Two different octaves. So then add some reverb, some delay. And some syncopated rhythms, which are very fun. Staying on the subject of massive amounts of distortion and also pitch shenanigans, this sound used to be this sound, which I've used quite a bit all over this set because it's super useful. So we pitch it down, and this one takes getting pitched down 2 octaves pretty well. And that little bit of artifacting gets kind of washed out by the distortion and delay and reverb. So let me turn off the delay and reverb. And then just wash that out a bit. And you get this massive Hans Zimmer stab. And as you can probably hear, this is very sidechained to the kick. So that way it doesn't get too overbearing. It pushes it back in the mix a little bit, and it functions as just this big wash of angry sounds. Also, on this same track, we let this big distorted blah run its course, and then I have put a clap on this as well, which is just disgusting. This track is not doing too much. There's just one singular little riser element, pitched to be within the key of the rest of the song, And it's this nice slow swell that also benefits quite a bit from the reverb. This reverb is doing a lot in this track. The combination of washing stuff out and distorting it to hell and back really works for me in this instance. Up next, a pretty simple hi-hat with just a little bit of reverb, tiny bit of delay. Open hi-hat. Hooray. And similar treatment for this ride cymbal. Just a little bit of reverb, little bit of delay. It's easy to take that too far. And these really kick in. When we go 4 on the floor. And in this case, I have slowed down my pattern by half, and I have it at 32 steps. So everything fits. And for ease of use, because I'm muting and unmuting stuff live, rather than go to my patterns window, I've just made scenes where the only thing switching is the kick pattern. But I wanted everything to be consolidated on one window to reduce the margin for error when playing this live, which came in clutch. So finally, once this is all going, we built up to this. I drop in this element. So this came about by accident. You can hear the massive, massive amounts of reverb and delay on this. This was a vocal that I had loaded in from a previous project because I've been making this whole thing very iteratively. So that vocal is from this track in the set. And you'll also notice that's the same kick. Give us some nice connective tissue. So back to this element. I accidentally loaded this in and pitched it down 2 octaves because I was experimenting with pitching stuff way down and distorting it and getting aggressive sounds out of it. And the rhythmic way it hits really works for this track. It just sounds like this really creepy whisper. Not in isolation. In isolation, it sounds kind of stupid, but in a full mix, you hear how that sibilance kind of syncs up with the hi-hats. That was pure luck, and I decided to leave it because it's a fun, kind of spooky little element. Also, for this entire track, it's been all circuit rhythm all the time. The circuit tracks has been just kind of sitting there being sad. It'll come back in a second, but at this point, I had built myself up to this big energy peak and kind of painted myself into a corner because my goal at this point was to expand the set from 30 minutes long to 45 minutes long, and I'd already hit this peak, so I needed to go for a dismount, basically. I needed to suck the energy out of the room and pivot to something else and then start to build it back up. So let's just turn that into a big, dramatic moment. So let's mute some stuff. And the idea is to basically transition into a kind of more dark techno influenced thing with some kind of big room techno influence as well very quickly. So I need to, over the course of 8 bars, go down in tempo from 160 to 135. So let me just show you how this goes. We mute this stuff, immediately go down to 135. And live, this got a reaction, which was great because I was really worried that this would be just flattening the energy level. And instead, it created some nice kind of novelty and which is great. So basically, the goal is to drop some stuff out and go down to 135 over the course of less than 8 bars. For my remaining 2 bars or so, I'm turning down the distortion of this kick a bit and taming it. And then, because I was getting some kind of popping and clicking from switching kicks when I switched to the next project, I'm just shortening this kick. And it also makes it sound like a much sharper kick, which more seamlessly brings us to this much sharper sounding kick. And I still cover that change up a little bit with the filter sweep. So now, this can kind of build up a bit. Keep building. So, step by step. Let's not hear the tracks for a second. Kick. That I've distorted a bit. That's a pretty rumbly kick. But I've doubled it up with a bass that I have cut some lows on. And distorted a bit. And sidechained. That's this right here. Sidechained very aggressively. And you'll notice it's following my extra little elements, which is this donk element here. And that has a little bit of reverb and delay on it, as is tradition. Like the original sample also has some reverb and delay, but I wanted to bring that into the stereo spectrum a little bit, wash it out a little bit further, make it sound a little more natural. So these three elements are our rhythm and bass section. I've also got on this same donk track, I'm switching between a few different sounds, such as this one, and a little snare for that little turnaround. And that combines nicely with that kind of syncopated kick. And speaking of little fill, percussion, and noises, I've got my kind of dedicated one-shot track, switching between a bunch of different sounds. That riser right before that horn sound goes a long way towards making this feel coherent. And then the rest of this is just finding little pockets to fit percussion in and layering up with my donk bass and other elements. Which gives this a lot more complexity and production value than I think you would expect out of a box like this. And of course, that is being sent quite a bit to the reverb, which helps glue these sounds together a little bit. I also have this sound, which I made in Synplant 2. That's got a little bit of reverb and delay. And a bit of distortion, mostly just to push it a bit louder. And it is at this point, dear viewer, that we finally bring in our old pal, the circuit tracks, for our next kind of foundational element. Very simple. I can kind of build this up over time. And I've showed this before, but let me quickly just mention that you can't like sidechain incoming signal on the circuit rhythm. So what I'm doing is running a kick drum on the circuit tracks, and I've turned its volume all the way down, and then I'm sidechaining this synth to this kick, all within the tracks. So it's a bit of a hack, but damn it, it does work. That means if this is all going, and I want to do a breakdown, I have to remember that when I mute this kick drum, if I want to kill the sidechain, I also have to mute this kick drum. So now that we've got our main groove and foundation, let's add some more percussion. This hi-hat is very simple. Just some velocity shenanigans. Some nice bounce. But then we can enhance that by bringing in some delay. There's a bit of phasiness, but overall, I think that sounds sick as hell, and I think it's an underrated thing to do to your hi-hats. To ratchet the energy level up another notch, we can bring in a ride. This is very simple. More velocity rocking back and forth. And a little bit of reverb. And some sidechain. Subtle amount. Too much sidechain, and anytime the kick does something other than 4 on the floor, it sounds wrong and gross. So once I've built up to this point, maybe brought this filter up a bit, I'm ready to introduce a new section, break the energy level back down just a tad, and then build again. So I can mute the ride and at the same time bring in a new element. And start to build that up, and then bring the ride back eventually, is where we're headed with this. This is one of those cases where the reverb and delay go an especially long way towards making a single one-shot sample sound a lot synthier. And pro tip, for filter sweeps for these synth elements, turn up the resonance just a little bit. Here's what it sounds like without that. It's fine. It's kind of static though. Turn up the resonance a bit. To my ears, that sounds a lot better. It makes the filter sweep sound part of the synth patch to me, and that is especially effective when paired with the reverb and delay. So I can kind of move this up and down over time, bring back everything else. Bring this up. So this element is fun. It floats nicely over the top of everything else, and then I like to move this filter to create this little call and response thing. So then I create a little breakdown, move some filters, and we're ready to move on. The construction of this section is very similar to the previous one. This donk bass is just doing more, and then on the tracks, I am doubling up this part. The fun thing about this is you can evolve it by bringing up the distortion level, messing with the filter frequency. This is a pretty hype moment, especially if I then drop out the donk bass. And then I can pivot back to this and prepare it for another transition. Bring up the distortion level a bit. Bring down the slope again to shorten the kick. Cut lows. So a different kick with some nice distortion. two elements that I'm switching between with a lot of delay and reverb. The delay is hard carrying this. It is grooveless without the delay. And then on top of that, this used to be a different kick drum. So then I've just cut off the beginning, distorted it a lot, I have to remember exactly where I said it. I found some sweet spot, and then cut just a little bit of highs. So that's what that sounds like. So I want it to fit with the kick, and I've sidechained it to the kick, of course, for this fun little galloping rhythm. This hi-hat, as is a trend, is set to the delay a bit. Let me get rid of that. I guess it's not a hi-hat, it's a shaker, but whatever. I'm also automating the pitch a very tiny bit, which makes it sound a lot cooler fed through the delay. Because then it becomes a little more like a swarm of bees or a swarm of shakers. 909 hi-hat. Classic. Ride cymbal. Each of these elements, when brought in, bring the energy level up a notch. And of course, reverb on the ride cymbal. I can drop this stuff out. And this is fun. One of the things that I've had to get really creative with is maximizing my sample slots, because you only have so many sample slots on the circuit rhythm. So I've built up a 45-minute long set, and the ultimate goal is an hour-long set. So I have to use and reuse sounds across different songs, not even because of sample time. I've got sample time to spare. It's all about the number of slots that I have. And I can't always keep track of what I'm using and I'm not using, so I usually err on the side of leaving stuff just in case, because I don't want to delete it in case I was using it in something and forgot about it. The reason I bring this up is that this used to be a bass sound, and I'm making it serve a dual purpose by turning down the slope, so shortening it quite a bit, cutting the lows, cutting some highs, and then sending it up 2 octaves. You could even do something like cut off that attack. And of course, as you can probably hear, it's sent to the reverb and delay. Playing this stressful little part that I think is quite fun. So at this point, this is all going. I've also got that sound that we've heard before. I can bring this in. For a bit of added dissonance. So a chord, but a really wobbly one. And I'm just bringing that in with the volume in the mixer window. And once I've built up this whole sandcastle, I can kick it back down to transition to our next track. And I've done some pattern chaining and some automation. So my kick starts to play the same pattern that it's about to play in the next song, and I have it increase in distortion. And in this case, I automated it. Mostly, I like to do as much by hand as possible. I want this to be as live as I can make it, meaning I am doing many, many things at many, many moments. But occasionally, I need to automate stuff because I can't do too many things at once. and I want to reduce my margin for error a bit if I can. So in this case, automation made sense. I switch projects. Some nice syncopation. So I've got a couple of tracks with percussion. With some distortion. And some reverb and delay, as you can probably hear. And now I can bring in another Circuit Tracks track. This little bass sweep, which fills out the track a lot. It sounds pretty empty without it. Although I do have another case of our old pal pitch down and distortion wombo combo. So this is a pretty simple little sweep element. So we pitch that down, distort it, and go, crap, that is way too harsh. And then filter it to taste, and then let the reverb and delay wash it out a bit, and provide us some nice ambience. Mangling sounds like that is a lot of fun. I recommend it if you haven't done it, regardless of device. Pitch it down way more than you feel like you should, distort it, filter it, wash it out. This element is fun. This is an uneven length, so it's doing this little polymeter thing, where it takes a while to repeat. Doing another fun pattern. Some hi-hats, where I'm switching between multiple different ones. Okay, so I've built up this groove long enough. I will reward you with a 4 on the floor kick as a treat. And our old pal, the ride cymbal, is back. Once I've built this up, it's time to get back into hard techno territory. This is the final track of the set as it currently stands. This is what I performed live in front of an audience. So I need to go out with a bang here. So I'm going to reactivate this project. Break everything back down. Ratchet up the tempo. Oh shit. Ratchet up the distortion. This is a bit much. Some chaos. That's the same kick. This distortion is crunchy. And the reason I switched projects is because I basically wanted to set a sweet spot for that distortion and then guarantee that I have it for when I go 4 on the floor. Here we go to 160. Bring back in our screechy element. You want a polymeter? So once I've let that ride a bit at 155 or 160 BPM, that's peak. That's as far as this whole idea goes. So it's time to very dramatically break it down. So I'll drop the tempo aggressively, drop the distortion, filter it down. Make it very clear to the audience and the person who's going to play after me that I'm done. I would like to build to something else eventually, but for now, that's where I'm going to leave it. If you'd like to see me perform this like 15-minute section of live set all in one go, you can check out this up over here. And if you'd like to see what the experience is like to play this whole thing live, you can check out this video up over here. I'll be back with a new video in a little bit. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching.